you've been following my college football previews for 2012, you know that we've done quite a few. 19 to be exact. Well, we're about to do previews 20, 21, and 22 over the next few days, and they're all going to deal with the fourth-ranked team in the country, the Big 12 preseason favorites, the Oklahoma Sooners. This part will deal in particular with the Oklahoma offense. Last season, 5th in the country in total O, 10th in the country in scoring. A big reason why they were able to do this, and one of the biggest reasons why they are ranked so high to start this season, is because of number 12 returning for the Sooners. That's right, in Landry we trust. Outstanding career for Landry Jones, and a lot of Sooner fans had to be thrilled when they found out during the offseason that he'd be coming back to Oklahoma one more year for his senior year and not to go to the NFL draft for 2012, where he would have been a virtual first-round guarantee. Last season, Jones threw for over 4,400 yards, had 29 touchdowns, and still those stats weren't quite as good as what he had the year before, but still a productive year for the Artesia, New Mexico senior, whom this season has an opportunity to get into the Heisman Trophy discussion. If you're looking at all that Landry Jones has done for this team, his records, being a Sammy Ball Award winner, winning a Big 12 championship, winning most of the games that he has started, the guy still, in my opinion, doesn't get the respect he deserves. Maybe it's because he doesn't look flashy. Maybe it's because he doesn't have maybe the most bubbly personality. And maybe because people are still comparing him to other quarterbacks of greatness for Oklahoma in the past, like a Sam Bradford, for example. But Landry Jones' impact, in my opinion, is not going to be felt by the haters, until Jones' career is over. Because entering next year, you're either going to have Blake Bell, who, by the way, was named on August 21st by the OU coaching staff as the number 2 guy behind Landry Jones, the backup quarterback. You're either going to have Bell or Drew Allen, or you're going to have Kendall Thompson next year for Oklahoma. Not that those guys can't play, but there's going to be a lot of experience lost, and Oklahoma's not going to start next season ranked in the top 4. I can promise you that. So Landry Jones' presence, his impact, his leadership, his mechanics, his knowledge of the game, you're happy to have that back this year, and I anticipate him having another good year despite the fact that he only has one full-time receiver from a year ago coming back to start the year in Kenny Stills. We'll talk about the receivers later. Trust me, you're so much better off having Landry Jones coming back this year than if you'd have to play somebody else. OU, in my opinion, would not be a top 10 team this year if Landry Jones didn't come back. And again, I don't think his impact will be felt by some until his career is over. He's done a fantastic job these past couple of seasons, and he'll have another good year. Just wait and see. In terms of the ground game for the Sooners, Dominique Whaley, a lot of eyes will be on him. Remember last year, he came out of nowhere. Rushed for over 600 yards in just 6 games. We knew his impact from day one of the regular season when he had the big game against Tulsa. Averaged 5.5 yards a carry, scored 9 touchdowns, and then Whaley couldn't play against Texas Tech because of the flu, and then the next week against Kansas State, injured, very first play from scrimmage, broken ankle, and it was done for him for 2011. So far, looks healthy. So far, looks fine in practice. And hopefully he hasn't lost his explosiveness, the ability to hit the hole fast. If that holds true for Whaley, he'll have another fine season. Backing him up, Roy Finch. Finch, he's a speedster, not very big, but does have terrific upper body strength, has quickness. He'll be used on kickoff returns. And we've seen glimpses of what Finch can do. I don't think we've seen the complete package yet from Roy Finch. And if we do, it's going to be something special to see. And one guy that we really haven't seen fully develop has been Brennan Clay from San Diego. Didn't play a whole heck of a lot last year, and who knows how much he's going to play this year. I think the number 3 guy will be either him or the freshman out of Jenks High School who excelled in both football and track, and that's Alex Ross. And the fullback, one of the best in the country. First-team All-Big 12 fullback because of his blocking. One tough guy in Trey Millard. You have him back too. And looking at the receivers for Oklahoma, For the first time since 2007, number 85, Ryan Broyles, will not be in an Oklahoma uniform. He'll be playing on Sundays for the Detroit Lions. That means that Kenny Stills, a junior, goes from being supporting cast member to headliner. This season, lots expected of him because last year he had over 60 catches, had 8 touchdowns, and nearly 850 yards of receiving. Not bad. Look for those numbers to be higher this year because he should be Landry Jones' #1 target. Also in that rotation mix as far as the first string, Trey McGuire, who would have played last year but had his grade issues unresolved. So this year, he's ready to go. He's already been named Big 12 Offensive Newcomer of the Year. That's how highly he's thought of. Remember, he's Oklahoma's first ever 5-star wide receiver recruit. And rounding out what I think will be the starting rotation for the OU receivers will be LaColton Bester, whom last season played JUCO ball, won a national championship in the JUCO ranks at a school in Mississippi. He should fit in just fine. Had over 1,000 yards receiving a year ago in junior college ball. Justin Brown played for Penn State a year ago. He was their second leading receiver, and you might remember the Penn State scandal. Unfortunately, who doesn't? That allowed Penn State players, current players, to transfer to anywhere they wanted to go without having to sit out a year without losing a year of eligibility. Well, Brown's taken full advantage of that, and he's now a Sooner. Last season, he was their second leading receiver, but came from an offense that did not specialize in passing. So it'll make a big difference for Brown. His numbers should be on the rise because he doesn't have 2 terrible quarterbacks like Matt McGloin or Rob Bolton throwing to him. He's going to have one of the best QBs in the country throwing to him in Landry Jones and an offense that's more pass-friendly than anything Penn State's ever run. And you have Sterling Shepard. Might remember his dad, Derek Shepard, who played football for the Sooners back in the 80s. I know I do, but then again, I'm old. So Sterling Shepard, I don't know if they'll redshirt him this year or if he'll be a part of the rotation, but he was an early commit for OU out of Heritage Hall High School in the Sooner State just a year and a half ago. And receiving, as far as the unknowns, well, we're going to see what happens with Jazz Reynolds and Trey Franks. These guys played last year. In fact, Reynolds, might remember that big game he had last year against Kansas State, was OU's 3rd leading receiver. But both players were suspended during the offseason. At one point, had their scholarships removed. But just recently, Bob Stoops gave them their scholarships back. They're practicing with the team. I got to imagine that we'll see them at some point during the second half of the season. They are going to miss some games, but the OU coaching staff's been pretty tight-lipped as far as how many games both will miss. Franks was not very impactful a year ago, but Reynolds was. And a couple of guys that you won't see this year for Oklahoma, Courtney Gardner won't play this year. He's ineligible. And Camille Jackson booted off the team, but Jackson didn't play that much anyway. And at tight end for the Sooners, and this is an interesting story, Genio Grissom. Now, you might be saying, wait a second, he plays defense. Well, he did. Played defensive end. And he asked Bob Stoops if he could play on the offensive side at tight end. Now, normally, because of OU's current situation with the defensive line, and we'll get into more of that when I go into part 2 of my defensive preview, would you think Stoops would allow Grissom to make the change? After all, David King, a starter at defensive end, projected this year, has been moved from DE to defensive tackle. So you'd think that Grissom's presence on the defensive side would be more warranted. Well, Stoops says, okay, try it for tight end. Let's see what happens. And he must have been pretty good because Grissom's now #1 on the depth chart, and primarily for his blocking. Pretty strong guy. We'll see how he does, though, with these, catching the ball. Last season, didn't have to worry about that with the tight ends because of James Hanna and Trent Rattery, but they're both gone now. And Austin Haywood, who would have been the starter this year, he transferred just about as soon as the 2011 season was over. So it looks like Grissom, it'll be his job on the offensive side, not the defensive side this year. And the offensive line. I'm really glad that I did my OU preview in late August rather than late July because this thing would be pretty outdated as far as the offensive line goes. That's because they've had some changes and they're not good changes at all. It's because of injuries. Ben Hayburn would have been a 4-year starter for Oklahoma. Played since 2009, and he was already named preseason All-Big 12 first team as far as offensive lineman goes, center. But He's had chronic back and neck issues, just too much pain, so he's not going to play football for the rest of his life. So Ben Haburn, thank you for your years of play for Oklahoma. Had a nice career, built your way all the way up, and it's just a shame that you couldn't play your senior year. But he's not the only player impacted by injury. Tyler Evans is as well. Just recently had an MCL injury, so his year is finished. So what looked like was going to be one of Oklahoma's more stable units, the offensive line, they now have some big-time issues as far as the interior. You've watched my show for years, you know that I don't beat around the bush, and I don't suck up, and if there is some issues with Oklahoma, I'm not going to hide the fact that there's not. Okay? This is an issue for the Sooners, the interior part of that offensive line. And look, they've got some games to figure this out. Okay? They've got 2 bye weeks in September, which now I think is a good thing. And they don't play a real good defensive line until they meet Texas, which will be the 2nd week in October. So they have some time to develop cohesiveness. They have time to still get things as far as the interior part of the offensive line situated. First 4 games, UTEP, Florida A&M, Kansas State, and Texas Tech. Defensively, none of those teams scare me, and they shouldn't scare Oklahoma either. You have 2 bye weeks in between before the Texas game, so you have time in order to get things worked out in terms of the inside running attack, because you're going to need these offensive linemen throughout the whole year, and I think this offensive line is still going to be a good one, but stating the obvious, they can't afford any more injuries up front, in particular with the center or the guard positions. Now, speaking of the center, Gabe Eichert has moved from guard to center. He's played center, though, in the past. And the other guards, this is an area of inexperience, and they really need these guys to stay healthy and be productive. Bronson Irvin, a junior at right guard. At the left guard position, Adam Sheed, a sophomore. The tackle position is not as dire. In fact, I think this is going to be a good area for OU because they've done such a good job in terms of pass protection. They gave up very few sacks in 2011. I think they're going to be fine in this area. Lane Johnson will make the transition from right tackle to left, and at the right tackle position now will be a guy that Oklahoma thinks that will be pretty stable in this area for years to come, and that is Darrell Williams. Both Williams and Johnson weigh just slightly over 300 pounds. The Oklahoma offensive line, I think for right now is good, but once again, they've got to develop cohesiveness with that interior part, and also the health of those guys has to be good. And again, that's an area that you may not be able to control, so this is an area where OU, in times in which they've got big leads, can really rely on those backup linemen to get some quality playing time, to get some snaps. And I think in terms of the health, the inside the part of that line is something to really watch out for. Well, that is my look at the Oklahoma offense. Part number 1 of my preview is in the books. Part number 2 of my Oklahoma preview will be my next show, in which I'll talk about Mike Stoops, and I'll talk about Tony Jefferson, talk about Tom Ward, and the rest of that Oklahoma defense, and we'll also talk about the special teams as well. The Oklahoma defense and special teams will be part 2 of my 3-part preview, and that will be on my next show. Boomer Sooner.